Good afternoon. If you have a Wonderful Words of Life hymn book, we're going to begin this afternoon with number 16, Come Ye Thankful People Come. 1-6, number 16, Come Ye Thankful People Come. Verse 1. Come ye thankful people, come, raise the song of harvest home. All is safely gathered in, ere the winter storms begin. God our Maker doth provide for our wants to be supplied. Come to God's own temple, come, raise the song of harvest home. Verse 2. All the world is God's own field, fruit unto his praise to yield. Wheat and tares together sown, unto joy or sorrow grown. First the blade and then the ear, then the full corn shall appear. Lord of harvest, grant that we wholesome grain and pure may be. Verse 3. For the Lord our God shall come, and shall take his harvest home. From his field shall in the day all offenses purge away. Give his angels charge at last, in the fire the tares to cast, but the fruitful ears to store in his garner evermore. Verse 4. Even so, Lord, quickly come to thy final harvest home. Gather thou thy people in, free from sorrow, free from sin. There forever purified, in thy presence to abide. Come with all thy angels, come, raise the glorious harvest home. Thank you for singing with me today. Please turn with me to number 39. 39, I love to tell the story. Number 39, I love to tell the story. Verse 1. Verse 1. I love to tell the story of unseen things above, of Jesus and his glory, of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story because I know 'tis true. It satisfies my longings as nothing else can do. I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme and glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. Verse 2. I love to tell the story, more wonderful it seems than all the golden fancies of all our golden dreams. I love to tell the story, it did so much for me, and that is just the reason I tell it now to thee. I love to tell the story Verse 3. I love to tell the story, 'tis pleasant to repeat what seems each time I tell it more wonderfully sweet. I love to tell the story, for some have never heard the message of salvation from God's own holy word. I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme in glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. Verse 4. I love to tell the story, for those who know it best seem he hungering and thirsting to hear it like the rest. And when in scenes of glory I sing the new song, 'twill be the old story that I have loved so long. I love to tell the story, 'twill be my theme in glory, to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. Thank you for singing today. Turn with me, if you will, to number 46, Nearer, My God, to Thee. Number 46, Nearer, My God, to Thee. Verse 1. Nearer, my God, to Thee, nearer to Thee, e'en though it be a cross that raises me, still all my song shall be nearer, my God, to Thee, nearer, my God, to Thee, nearer to Thee. Verse 2. Though like the wanderer, the sun gone down, darkness be over me, my rest a stone, yet in my dreams I'd be nearer, my God, to Thee, nearer, my God, to Thee, nearer to Thee. Verse 3. There let the way appear, steps unto heaven, all that Thou sendest me in mercy given, angels to beckon me nearer, my God, to Thee, nearer, my God, to Thee, nearer to Thee. Verse 4. Then with my waking thoughts bright with Thy praise, out of my stony griefs Bethel I'll raise, so bold my woes to be nearer, my God, to Thee, nearer, my God, to Thee, nearer to Thee. And verse 5. Or if on joyful wing cleaving the sky. Sun, moon, and stars forgot. Upward I'll fly. Still all my song shall be nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer, my God, to thee. Nearer to thee. Thank you for your excellent singing today.
Well, happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome to our chapel service. I'm so glad that you could join us. And I feel so good about things starting to open up and everything else. The COVID thing looks promising, although I know the track record has been 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, but we'll keep praying. In the meantime, we're continuing our series on 1 Peter. Quite some time ago, on an isolated European airfield, a small twin-engine plane revved up its engines and prepared to taxi to take off. But suddenly, a lone figure raced through the pelting rain, his silhouette frequently illuminated by flashes of lightning. And once on board, he had a brief but very heated conversation with the pilot. And when he turned to the passengers on board, this is what that figure said, the guy that had run out onto the tarmac and gotten on the plane. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "my name is Walter Beach." He said, "I'm the man who designed this aircraft. It's a Beechcraft. I'm the man who designed this aircraft. I know what it can do and what it cannot do. And I do not think it is wise for you to fly this plane in these weather conditions tonight. And I'm sure your trip is important. And this is not what you want to hear, but if I were you, I would not fly in this weather." And so the pilot interrupted and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I've flown this plane for years. I know what it can do and what it can't do, and I don't anticipate any problems. Please stay on board." And so of the handful of people on the plane, it's not a huge plane, only one woman disembarked with Mr. Beach. And so within minutes after takeoff, the plane crashed. Sure enough, taking the lives of everyone on board. And the one woman who alone had made the decision to leave the plane was Eleanor Roosevelt, wife of the President of the United States, Franklin FDR. And her life was saved because she followed the instructions of the designer and maker of the aircraft. And I think that's an important safety tip when it comes to us in our relationships. Let us follow the design. Let's follow the instructions of the designer, the one who designed us for relationship, and that would be God. And so that's where we are in our study of 1 Peter. We come now to a section that's godly instructions for relationships. And so I'd like to read 1 Peter 3, verses 1 through 7. And while Peter talks about marriage, we're going to take a much broader view than just marriage, because the principles I think Peter is talking about applies to all relationships. But this is what Peter says in 1 Peter 3. "Wives, in the same way, submit yourselves to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives, when they see the purity and reverence of your lives. Your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as elaborate hairstyles and wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. For this is the way the holy women of the past who put their hope in God used to adorn themselves. They submitted themselves to their own husbands, like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham and called him her Lord. You are her daughters if you do what is right and do not give way to fear. And husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner, and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers." And so we're going to take a look at relationships today. And we're not going to talk about marriage, because most of you are not married, and that's okay. You have been, or maybe you never have been married, but we're going to take a much bigger view, the 30,000-foot level view, and we're going to talk about something else that I think the main principle behind what Peter is saying when it comes to our marriage relationship. And so, for example, consider relationships in terms of like an Olympic event. Now, if it's in the wintertime, I realize that most Winter Olympics start at the top of a hill and go down very rapidly, so maybe that's not the greatest picture for relationships. But what if they gave gold medals for relationships? What would it take to get the gold? What if having a great relationship, like a great marriage, or being a great parent, or a great friend, wouldn't it be awesome to stand on one of those platforms and they play the national anthem and you'll have a gold medal around your neck because you did something to make a relationship great? They talk about single quality for Olympic athletes, the quality of dedication. If you're going to go for the gold, it will take years and years of practice. Well, I'd like to talk about one single quality for relationships. And the single quality that I think Peter is the overarching principle of this passage is Peter calls it submission. Now, when you hear that word, the tendency is not to have a positive association. It's negative. In fact, nobody likes the word submission. It's not in style, not even a little bit. It's one of those words where if we think the Bible, might be out of date, this would be the word. However, take a look at some of the positive meanings that are used today behind the word submission. Words like back down, bend to another's will, comply, cower, crawl, cringe, give in, live a dog's life. Not exactly a positive phrase. See, I would suggest that the word submission suffers from an image problem. And a word that has a way more positive association than submission, which has totally a negative slant, is this. It is the word unselfishness. And that's what I would suggest is the basic principle behind what Peter talks about when it comes to marriage. He uses marriage as an illustration. And I've counseled tons of married couples. I've performed lots of weddings. My wife and I like to do pre-marriage mentoring with couples. And one of the things that I'll mention is, if you don't want to put the other needs of the other person first, don't get married, because that's the deal you're making. No longer are you living for yourself. Now you're living first for your spouse. That's the way I read it in 1 Corinthians 7. And so when we marry, we are choosing to put somebody else's needs first. That's kind of the college course. Graduate school is having children. You're really putting someone else's needs first then. But the definition of submission, whenever you see this word in the Bible, is having the courage to give up my rights to meet another person's needs. And see, anybody who does that deserves a gold medal. But again, I think a more positive association is the word unselfishness. It means the same thing. And I would suggest that there are three ways to live life. There's my way, there's God's way, and then there's other people's way. And I can live life other people's way, do what they say, because I want to make them happy. But I'm not doing it because I want to. I'm being subjected to them. I'm down under them. Or I can live my life my way and do what I want to do because I want to do that. That means I'm above everybody else, trying to be the best. But in the New Testament, see, neither of those ways work. Do it God's way. See, my way tends to look like a tiger crawling to the top. Living to please others is kind of like being a turtle, hiding in a shell and just letting other people throw things at me, slowly poke my way through life. My way and others' way, those don't work very well. And so a lot of people think that submission is doing it the other person's way, and that's not what it is, not at all. It doesn't mean that you're others' way means that you're a doormat. You let people walk over you and do whatever they want. But neither does it work to become a tank and to run over everybody else. It's something in between. It's called unselfishness. Learning to be unselfish in our relationships. And Peter talks about two very basic things about unselfishness. Why we should be unselfish and how we can do it. The why and the how. So why should I be unselfish? Now, I know people, frankly, that for some, it seems like selfishness is working out just fine for them. I'm getting my way and things are going okay. Why should I be unselfish? And for others, we're not so sure about being unselfish. Let somebody else be the first in this. That'd be the unselfish thing to do, right? Well, Peter gives three powerful reasons for being unselfish in our lives. And the first one is this: be unselfish because selfishness is the source of conflict. James 4 verse 1 says this, listen up. Do you know where your fights and arguments come from? They come from the selfish desires that war within you. It's the source of conflict in our homes. You take our arguments, our conflicts, and boil them down to this one thing, and every conflict, whether between people or nations or whatever, at the root of it is this: somebody somewhere is being selfish. Now, of course, in your arguments is always the other person being selfish, but somebody's being selfish in a conflict. And so in order to bring a new sense of peace to your home, your relationships that you struggle with, this key to unselfishness can make a huge difference. It can help find some common ground in what used to be a battleground. Well, number two, another reason why to be unselfish is because unselfishness is the secret to change. Peter writes to wives and encourages them, be unselfish so that if your husbands don't believe the word, they may be won over, that they may be changed without words by the behavior of their wives. See, change is important in any relationship. It's natural, it's healthy to want change in our relationships. That's what growth is all about. Even if you've got a great relationship, you should want to change and develop. If you're really struggling in any relationship, of course you're desperate for change to begin to happen. I've heard it put this way: men marry women expecting that they won't change, and they do. Women marry men expecting them to change, and they don't. And so there can be, that by itself can create a lot of conflict. But how do we make change happen? Well, how many have you ever tried to push somebody or argue somebody into change? How'd that work out for you? I've discovered this: I make a terrible Holy Spirit. I'm not very good at it, so I don't even try anymore. What does it help? How can you be an influence for change in other people? Well, it's unselfishness. That's the key. It's the most powerful tool that we have at our disposal to encourage other people to grow and change. If you think about it, Jesus Christ was the most unselfish person who ever walked the face of the earth. He gave his life unselfishly for others. And look at how many people he's changed over the course of history. So if you think about it, who's had the most impact on your life when it comes to change? Was it selfish people? Well, of course not. It's been people who have acted unselfishly toward you, people who helped you grow and change. Unselfishness is the secret to change. And Peter here assumes something that is important. He assumes that these two people, for example, in a marriage or in a relationship, are going to stay together and work it out, work towards it, even though one has become a believer and one is not. And that's the background that Peter's writing to. Wives who became believers and their husbands refused to believe. In fact, it's a pretty strong word that's used in this passage. It's not that their husbands haven't heard, it's that they've heard it and they've rejected it, the gospel. And so in some ways, they're incompatible. I've come across people in my ministry that feel like, well, when I got married, I wasn't really seeking God's will, so I'm really wondering now if the person I'm married to is God's will for my life. Maybe I've missed God's will for my life. I married the wrong person. Well, here's the answer to that question. The person you're married to now, if you are married, is God's will for your life. That's it. The Bible says that when we become married, we become one flesh, and God takes that seriously. God's will is that we change, develop, and grow where we are. Well, then a third reason why we should be unselfish is that selfishness short-circuits prayer. 1 Peter 3, verse 7 is addressed to husbands. It says, do this so that nothing will stop your prayers. See, the way I act towards others affects my relationship to God. And I can do it my way using my selfish energy, or I can do it God's way, depending upon his boundless energy. You see, selfishness at its core is saying, I'm depending on myself. That's what it's all about. It is living independently from God. It's saying, I'm not depending on God, and prayer is the opposite of that. Prayer is depending on God. So selfishness is the antithesis of prayer in that sense. It becomes to a point of who are we depending on? And I have to confess, it's a lot easier to talk about unselfishness than it is actually to act unselfishly. It's one thing to talk about it, but the real change comes when we begin to act this way. And so as you look through this passage and other passages in the Bible about relationships and what makes them work, there are three simple truths truths about being unselfish from a fellow struggler. So here it is. How can I be unselfish? Well, first one is this. It is understanding. Learn to consider the needs of other people. Second is respect, the ability to honor another person's value and sacrifice, the decision to act on somebody else's behalf. So first is understanding. Consider other person's needs. 1 Peter 3:7 is addressed to husbands, and it says, in the same way, you husbands should live with your wife in an understanding way. I like the story. It's a joke, actually, of the biker who was riding his Harley along a California beach when suddenly the sky parted above his head. In a booming voice, the Lord spoke to this biker. And the Lord said, because you have tried to be faithful in all ways, I will grant you one wish. So the biker pulled over and said, I want to build a bridge to Hawaii so I can ride my Harley over to Hawaii. And the Lord said, well, your request is pretty materialistic. Think of the enormous challenges for that kind of undertaking. The supports required, reaching to the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, and the concrete and steel it would take to make it. It will nearly exhaust several natural resources. I can do it, but it's hard for me to justify your desire for such worldly things. Take a little more time and think of something that could possibly help the human race. So the biker thought about it for a while and finally said, Lord, I wish that I and all men could understand women. I want to know what she feels inside, what she's thinking when she gives me the silent treatment, why she cries, what she means when she says nothing's wrong, and how I can make a woman truly happy. And the Lord thought for a minute and said, do you want 2 lanes or 4 lanes with that bridge? Of course, that's just a joke, but I'm not suggesting that it's impossible for men to understand women, but after 43 years of marriage, I can identify with that biker. I mean, you know, we operate on different wavelengths so often. In fact, I heard another story about, and the caption was, celibacy can be a choice in life or a condition imposed by circumstances. And so, while attending a marriage weekend, Walter and his wife Anne listened to the instructor say this: it's essential that husbands and wives know the things that are important to each other. And then he addressed the men. He said, can you name and describe your wife's favorite flower? And so Walter leaned over and touched Anne's arm gently and whispered, gold medal all-purpose, isn't it? As in flower, F-L-O-U-R. And so that's how Walter's life of celibacy began. It does wonders when we try at least to understand. I'm not saying we're going to completely understand the opposite sex, but at least to make the effort, because that's what adds value to people's lives. And the word understanding that 1 Peter 3:7 uses literally means to live together according to knowledge. Get to know the other person. Unselfishness begins when we say, what do you need? As opposed to, what do I need? Philippians 4 verse 5 says, let everyone see that you are unselfish and considerate in all that you do. So notice those words, everyone, unselfish, considerate. Those are the attitudes that are supposed to be a part of every relationship in our lives. So how? How do you do that? How do you start to care more about the needs of other people than your own? Well, I would suggest that it requires a mad skill that you develop. And the mad skill is this. It's called listening. It's like a superpower. When you and I begin to learn to listen, we develop the skill of caring. Because when people feel like they've been listened to, they feel like you care about them. You understand. And true confession, full disclosure, that's something that I've struggled with. When my wife and I were first married, I was not a very good listener. And so, a couple pieces of advice about learning the skill of listening. That's, first of all, you have to work at it. It doesn't come naturally, I think, for most people. I'm not sure that there's anybody out there who's just naturally a great listener. You know, because my default is I anticipate what they're saying, and then I'm planning what I'm going to say next. And so what I've found is I need to slow down and just pay and be all there, be all present as I listen. And so let them tell it their way. I don't have to interject. You know, when my wife, wants to tell me some things, she wants to say it in her own words. And so it's important for me to let her do that. And then make eye contact when you listen, because it says, you're important to me. I mean, between body language and verbal communication, if you're reading the newspaper or whatever, reading the news online, and your friend is talking to you, it's like, you might be hearing what they're saying, but chances are they're not going to take it that way because you're not focused on them. So, in fact, our longest running marital tiff, it took us a long time to figure this out. But it all precipitated when Sean and I took a road trip. We went to visit some friends in Sacramento. And on the drive back, I just got violently ill. And I don't hardly ever get sick, but so we were gonna drive to Ashland, but instead, like around Red Bluff, I was so nauseated and sick to my stomach. I pulled over, and I was going to check into a motel, and I was waiting in line for the motel, and I had to run outside, give my wife the credit card, and throw up in the bushes. She had to check in the motel. I just felt so terrible. And I thought, oh, this is great, It's a Friday night. They think I'm probably, been drinking too much or whatever. But I don't know what I had. And all night long, my wife kept poking me and prodding me. Are you okay? Are you alive? And, I mean, I understand why she gets worried, because I've used up at least 3 of my 9 lives. But, I just wanted to be left alone, so. But the next morning, I felt I wasn't sick to my stomach anymore. I had enough 7-Up, and got up and drove home. Well, the next day, Sean got the bug, whatever bug it was that I had. And so it's the middle of the night, and I didn't know this because I was asleep, but she was in the bathroom throwing up. And she wasn't really thrilled that I had given her this thing to begin with, but she was also quite perturbed that I wasn't holding her hair and babying her and wiping her brow with a hand cloth or anything like that. And so I get awakened, and my wife is like yelling at me. Well, she never does, and what she was saying is, "You suck. You are a sucky caregiver." And she slugged me on the shoulder. I'm going, I don't recommend that as a way of waking up on a regular basis. But what it came down to was how we were each raised as kids. And the way I was raised is whenever I got sick, my mom would make like things I really disgust. I still think they're disgusting. Milk toast. Whoever makes soggy bread is like, it makes me gag. It's going to add to my nausea. And she'd make me milk toast and these other, she would just try to hover over me. I just wanted to be left alone. But my wife, her upbringing was totally different than mine. Her parents became alcoholics when she was a kid, and she said the only time her mom ever gave her any positive attention was when she was sick. And her mom would cook her favorite, food that she could eat, and give her ice cream, and just dote on her and baby her. And so we realized we were expecting totally unconsciously, we weren't communicating, we were expecting to be treated totally different. Anytime she got sick, we had an argument, we had a marital conflict, and that was the root behind it. So now I make sure, I get some palm fronds and some peeled grapes, and but I at least try to say, okay, is there anything I can do? Is there anything you need? Do you need 7-Up? Is there, and so she knows that I care. And that's the most important principle of all. Just let people know that you care. And it's not, with your words, it's great, but with your actions is even better. So that leads us to the next thing of how we can improve our relationships by being unselfish, and that is to honor the value of that other person. Peter writes to husbands and says, show your wives respect because God gives them the same blessing that he gives to you. In Ephesians 5, it's a parallel passage, and it says, show your husbands respect, that's to the wives. But see, respect is hugely important to both men and women. And so when I respect somebody, I'm seeing honor, I'm seeing value, and they have inherent value because every member of the human race is made in the image of God. We are all image bearers, and so that's what gives people inherent worth and value. And so Philippians 2 verse 3 says, when you do these things, don't let selfishness or pride be your guide. Instead, be humble and give more honor to others. So that phrase, give more honor to others than to yourselves. Now, it doesn't say, pretend that you're not valuable and you don't have needs. It just says give more honor to others. It's not talking about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less. And that's when you can begin to appreciate people. And so, and when we appreciate people, if you appreciate something, it means in financial terms, they go up in value. If something appreciates in value, like a house, it goes up in value. And when we do that, when we give honor to people, it raises their value. They appreciate. And so take time to do that. Give more honor to them than to yourself. And then thirdly is sacrifice, the willingness to act on another's behalf. Again, there's a big difference between unselfish words and unselfish actions. And it's much easier to talk unselfish things, but unselfish actions involve sacrifice and can be inconvenient. 1 John 3:18 says, let us stop just saying we love people. Let us really love them and show it by our actions. And that's where most of us struggle. It's easy to say, I want to meet your needs, or I value you and I love you with my whole heart. That makes us feel good. Sacrificial talk, gives me a good feeling, but it's the actions that can scare us to death. And so, and I've heard husbands say, well, honey, I'm willing to die for you. Just don't make me give up playing golf or whatever, So, but that's where sacrifice really makes a difference, is in the little things. In relationships that work, they involve hundreds of little sacrifices. And maybe a few, but hundreds of little ones daily. For example, my wife loves hiking. And I'm familiar with the 5 languages of love, but I've discovered a 6th. It is hiking. She loves hiking. And so we would hike in the summer, and we'd go snowshoeing in the winter, which is suspiciously like hiking. And on one occasion, she asked if I liked hiking. And I said, well, not really. And she was really bummed. She was really crestfallen. And I was able to redeem a little bit of it by saying, I might not like hiking so much, but I like being with you. That's the payoff for me. And so, but that's the kind of compromise, that's the kind of sacrifice. It's not like I'm sacrificing my life, but I am sacrificing what I might prefer to do. 1 Corinthians 13 verse 5 says, love does not demand its own way. It makes sacrifices. And so, again, one thing that my wife and I did I don't know even how we figured this out, but we began a contest to try to outspoil the other person. Now, because so many couples, it's possible to get into that vicious negative cycle where, criticism and that sort of thing starts happening. And so we try to outspoil the other person. We make a contest out of it. And to this day, I make her a latte and I bring it to her in bed every morning. And I make really good lattes, I have to say. And she spoils me through food. I'm a full gospel preacher because, she's a great cook. So is it easy? No, we didn't come across that on our own. I think God gave us the wisdom to do that. But for a lot of folks, this could be a real turning point in your relationships, and even with people that maybe you've been struggling with in the past. And for some, this could even be a turning point eternally in your relationship with Christ, the one who loves you the most. But if that's going to happen, there's something you're going to have to learn to let go of. To be unselfish, you have to learn to let go of your fear. It's scary to be unselfish. The fear is, if I'm unselfish, they're going to take advantage of me. If I'm unselfish, then I might lose myself. How do you find the strength to get past that fear, that barrier? 1 John 4:18 says, we need no fear of someone who loves us perfectly. His perfect love for us eliminates all dread of what he might do to us. Or perhaps you've heard put it this way, perfect love casts out fear. See, in order for you to overcome the fear of selfishness and unselfishness in relationships, the first thing to do is find somebody who loves you perfectly. And guess what? That somebody is Jesus Christ. And I found that his perfect love for me gives me the internal security so that I can reach out and be unselfish towards others. And so maybe that's a good place to start, is just learn to begin to be unselfish and receive the love of somebody who loves us perfectly, because that can deliver us from all of our fears and our hang-ups. 1 Peter 1:22 says, "Now you can have real love for everyone because your souls have been cleansed from selfishness and hatred when you trusted Christ to save you. So see to it that you really do love one another warmly with all your hearts." See, God has given us new strength and power to love people in a new way. Strength that we could have never had before. And so it's up to us to look to him for our strength and power. So will you pray with me? Jesus, I pray that this attitude of unselfishness would be expressed in all of our relationships. I thank you for your unselfish love for me. And I want to accept that love and pray that you would help me to live your way in all of my relationships. In Christ's name, amen. And I'd like to show a video in conclusion that talks, I think, about the honor of honoring and valuing other people. Let's take a look, and then we'll be done.